I feel like every cliche about marketing is true. It's just like you're trying a bunch of stuff. Every now and then something works and you're like, okay, let's try that 50 more times. And then maybe if you're lucky, it actually does repeat and it wasn't just a fluke.
Hello and welcome back to Indie Bites, the podcast where I bring you stories of fellow indie hackers in 15 minutes or less. Today I'm joined by Justin Duke, who is the founder of Buttondown, a simple email tool he launched in 2017. Justin was last on the podcast 2 years ago when he just hit 15k MRR and had left his role at Stripe to focus on Buttondown full time. I was struck then by Justin's well thought out approach to building. He makes calculated risks and shares a lot of his learnings on his blog, Applied Cartography, which is an essential read for any indie hackers. This episode I catch up with Justin to hear how he's grown a team to 8 people and his approach to building a company he loves. This is a cut down version of an hour long catch up I had with Justin, which I'm going to make available on the Indie Bites membership at indiebites.com/membership, where we discuss his personal blog, how he structures his time as a new parent, and we go deeper into hiring high agency unicorns. I also want to thank my sponsor Email Octopus for supporting the show. Now obviously Email Octopus are a competitor to the product of today's guests, so I asked Justin if he was okay with it, and his response shows exactly how all founders should approach competitors.
Near and dear to my heart. They've been like posting sort of their bootstrap stuff for years, and like they have a very rich history of like talking about their growth. And my philosophy with the email space is always like my biggest competitors are the tools that like have been around for 30 years, not 10 years. Like that's where the truly subpar user experiences are happening right now.
So if you want to give Email Octopus a go, head to emailoctopus.com or hit the link in the show notes. Another quick note, Justin is using a Blue Yeti microphone. You know my thoughts on that, so I can only apologise for his audio quality. I promise you'll forget about it after a couple of minutes. We kick off this episode talking about how Buttondown is going 2 years after our previous Indie Bites episode.
It was so funny. I listened back to the episode we did, almost 2 years ago. It sounded like I was talking about me and Buttondown from like 10 years ago. The business itself doing really, really well. I can no longer really share revenue numbers because we've just kind of grown to the point, but very healthy growth. After leaving Stripe, there was like a clear sort of mission in my head, which was like, I want to just figure out if this is sustainable for me from like an existential point of view, from a financial point of view. Like this feels good to like spend my time working on this full time. And then once we kind of hit that milestone, I was like, yeah, I like this. This is what my days are. Then it was like, okay, what's next? Because you can always grow a company. Like the default position is to like keep trying to grow it. Buttondown had reached the point where I couldn't just keep doing it myself. Like I knew I was having a kid. I had other interests and I didn't want to work 80-hour weeks. So it's like, do you hire a team? And then if you hire a team, you're shifting back into management when really what I like doing is engineering. And a lot of the past year for me has kind of been navigating that maze of figuring out a way to keep having it be a business that I legitimately enjoy spending all of my time thinking about and getting my hands dirty in, while also still like making sure it grows, making sure the new folks on the team aren't thrown off into the deep end, making sure new customers are still having a great experience, and kind of like hitting that next level beyond just, okay, this is not quite at escape velocity, but the fight to survive, that part is done. Like Buttondown is a healthy and thriving business. Now what are the next sets of goals?
You're absolutely right, because I speak to founders that fall into this trap. There was one chap I met the other day who'd like grown his business to 30 camera. That's very healthy. And he was just like, am I just like chasing growth now? Is this it? He was bored. He was like, what's next? And you've got so many of these indie people that like just getting something off the ground, getting it to a few K MRR, and then don't like, once they're now in the business, to actually keep working on it and like keep motivation going. Or you got other people who do like the fact they've built themselves a job where they have pretty much full control over what they do and they're very passionate about it. So I'm guessing you've put a lot of thought into making sure it's in the latter camp.
Yeah, one of the things that has been sort of like priority number one is, and I've run into this phrase a lot, but like I really wanted to avoid making myself a job that I hated. And like I think it's very obvious to me how that would happen, of like, if I just carve out all of the things that I really love, which is like doing engineering work, doing like interesting product exploration, talking to customers and users, and I say, these are no longer worth my time because they're low leverage. I'm going to hire those positions out and I'm going to manage those people instead. And what I'm left with is all this stuff like, quote unquote, a CEO is supposed to do, but also not what I'm particularly passionate about or frankly even good at. And figuring out a way to balance those two things has been really, really key, especially the past 6 months.
So how big's the team? How's growth? And what are you spending your time on day to day?
Yeah, so we're around 8 folks total, and that's a mix of mostly contractors, a couple of W-2s, myself included. And what my day-to-day looks like is less around line level management of, okay, it's time for everyone to open Linear and we're going to carve out the tasks and do all that. I've been very particular about wanting to work with folks who feel really comfortable with ambiguity and sort of getting their hands dirty and doing things that might not necessarily be the case at larger companies. And so the example I always give is most large companies, even really, really good ones, design the IC engineer role such that the median IC engineer doesn't have to do design or talk with customers or look at a support inbox or any of those things. And my philosophy has sort of been the opposite of I feel very strongly that that's where the best product work comes from, is being able to context switch from this customer wrote in asking about this thing and they think it's a bug, but actually what this is a better UX waiting to happen, and I can connect those dots because I'm looking at all of these things. And so finding and working with folks who are really, really good at that level of thinking, as opposed to you can imagine a abstract contract engineer who's just give me a bunch of tickets and I'm going to knock them out, and that is my relationship with this business. And that to me has been really, really rewarding because it removes some of the things that I didn't love about engineering management, which was the administrivia. Instead, a lot of the engineering conversations I get to have are closer to design or architectural conversations, which feels much more interesting and rewarding to me.
Any marketing hires?
Not yet. That's
Amazing.
Probably going to change at some point. The thing that has always been a good problem and a bad problem with Buttondown's growth is we have all of the conventional SaaS playbook things of you do referrals and you mess with AdWords and you've got programmatic SEO and all of these things. And they're all fine. And then someone who has a massive following starts to use Buttondown and broadcast to their subscribers, hey, we're using Buttondown now. And that just dwarfs everything else. And so there's every now and then I'm just maybe I shouldn't do any marketing whatsoever. All that really matters is relationship management with these really, really large authors. And because that is the dominant flywheel, that's all we need to care about. And of course that's not true, because what has happened, I think growth-wise with Buttondown over the past year is, we've sort of hit saturation in a couple niches and a couple parts of the super technical space. But to break into more non-technical niches where we're still a really good and compelling product, that's where we need that other bucket of marketing, because we don't have people in those spaces yet to proselytize. But I feel every cliche about marketing is true. It's just you're trying a bunch of stuff. Every now and then something works and you're okay, let's try that 50 more times. And then maybe if you're lucky, it actually does repeat and it wasn't just a fluke.
How are you sort of approaching who you are for? And as you get bigger and bigger, and you're saying you've sort of reached terminal velocity in some niches, what is your approach to that at the moment?
We have doubled down on being very aggressively for technical users. We had temporarily removed the word markdown from our splash page. Markdown has always been the canary of are we trying to very, very loudly signal that we are for technical people or not? Because if you're a non-technical user and you read Markdown through the H2 and you don't know what that is, you're am I going to need to Google to understand this product? Conversely, if you're a technical user and you see Markdown, even if you don't really care about that as a feature, you instantly know this is a product for me. And I think that kind of niche, because it is the total addressable market of that little subset is not $100 million company status. It's a very strong and solid company, but I think that is too narrow in focus for a lot of the larger and more nascent companies to try and push at. And beyond that, what we want to just do is focus on polish. Like focus on polish, and I'd say focus on service. Of our churn is incredibly low, and I say that despite email being this very weird industry where at any day, any point in time, you can export all of your subscribers, all of your archives, move to a new service, and everyone kind of has the same pricing model and same feature base. And the reason people stick around are for three reasons. One is familiarity. People go with the tools that they're already using for something else that they're comfortable in. They go for stability, both in terms of like the API and the interface, and also deliverability, because that's the most important thing for emails is actually landing in inboxes. And the third is like customer service, right? We have so many people who explicitly say, yeah, I was thinking about moving to this other provider, and the reason I'm not is because the customer service is really good. I'm actually chatting with a human and not a chatbot, or like getting bumped between like 3 or 4 different routing things. Like I can email support and I'm getting a response back the same day from the same person who chatted with me like 3 weeks ago.
Your copy on your homepage, is that written by you?
It is. That was the first time I got some help. I was working on this because this is also the tunnel vision of spending all day and all week and all year, like thinking about emails and newsletters, is you forget that words mean different things to different people. But the original prose comes from either me or my design partner, who I'm going to shout out, Nick DeSabato. That's nickd.org.
It's very cool. I love it. Do you think more people should take this approach to marketing the site, just having a couple of paragraphs of copy, a bit of social proof like you have? I'll put the link for this if people are listening and they want to read through this page we're discussing.
One of the like things that is probably correct that I've always disregarded is I've never run a single A/B test or a single like quantitative test on Buttondown splash page. Like whatever we publish is always based purely on vibes of like, does this seem like a more accurate reflection of who we are, who we're trying to attract, all of those things. And like, that's the only thing that matters. The person who reads like this amount of text above the fold and gets like scared off because they're just like, this is not for me, this doesn't resonate, is not going to be a good Buttondown user. And conversely, like the people who read this and they're like, this voice is so different than every other SaaS like marketing site that I've ever seen, and all those people make really, really good customers. And it's better to kind of splinter that really, really early, top in the funnel, as opposed to like having a very, very generic top of funnel that gets a lot of people through the door, but then once they're deeply enmeshed, then they're like, oh, this actually wasn't for me at all, I'm going to bounce off. And it's also, I think, just kind of fun. Like, I do not envy the folks who kind of have to like redesign their bento grid every year and like I'm always super impressed with all those really cool micro interactions and stuff, but like I'm always suspicious that those things have a meaningful impact on the conversion of the landing page itself, and they're not just effective because they're like a social channel of you can show that as a video and that brings people in through the front door. That's valuable, but that's also like sort of a different value prop than just having really strong prose.
And I guess because you run Buttondown yourself, you're free to make decisions like this, and no one's telling you.
I don't need to ask anyone for extra time off. I don't need to ask anyone for irregular hours. The downside of that, of course, is like, as opposed to being in a larger organization or a place where you have stakeholders or co-founders who can help shoulder the burden. Every email I didn't answer in like October because I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night and all that stuff, like there was no one else to really answer that. It would be me the following day. And so there's always, I think, this interesting balance between having a lot of independence and agency and freedom versus having a lack of safety net or a lack of support system to help you. And what I've always tried to do is like thread that needle of like, let me make sure that if I do drop off the grid for a week or whatever, there's scaffolding and infrastructure in place, but I can still change my website's H1 on the drop of a hat because I feel like it. We do these seasonal H1s that I tank conversion, I'm sure, but I just find them funny of like, change Buttondown to Buttondown because it's Halloween. Like that's why I want to run a company, is to do silly things. And to me, like sacrificing that in pursuit of some other thing sort of feels like missing the whole point.
Dude, you're so right. And this is what I love about builders, people like you. You can do what interests you and what's fun and what has personality, and you can bring that because it is just you. But you are still very thoughtful about the decisions you're making with the product. But why not have fun with it at the same time? Now, a few minutes left. What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What's your content consumption diet currently?
The business or nonfiction book that by far I've loved the most this year is called Becoming Trader Joe. A lot of these business book autobiographies I've found to be like really, really boring and really, really facile, where it's like, oh yeah, I had this divine plan from day one and here's every master stroke along the way. And this is like the polar opposite of that.
Newsletter? You put me on to Matt Levine's money newsletter, and you said it was just beautiful writing. But what else are you reading newsletter-wise?
I think the next one I'm going to plug is Patio 11 or Patrick McKenzie's Bits and Money, which covers a lot of the same stuff. But I think he has a similar aptitude of like, let me break down these really, really important but deeply technical topics about finance and explain and entertain the reader in a way that I think very few people have been able to do.
Cool. Well, I've got to let you go. It's 10 past.
Thank you so much. This was a blast to chat again and catch up. I feel like this was less of an interview and more just like hanging out with you again after a couple of years.
It was. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to turn this into an episode. Justin, keep doing amazing stuff. Really appreciate chatting.
Of course. Take it easy and chat soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Indie Bites. If you enjoyed this conversation and want access to the full hour-long chat Justin and I had, sign up to the Indie Bites membership. Link is in the show notes. And a thank you to my sponsor, Email Octopus, for making the show happen. That's all from me. See you next week.